All right, what's happening, Mark? Bare Naked Willie? We are back with another Friday. Not just another Friday, but a BS Friday. What's happening, brother?
Oh, Dave, I haven't recovered from the shivers of construction. Man, what a week. Welcome everyone to BS Friday Live on Dave Cooper Live. I'm happy, Dave. It's been an awesome week, brother.
It has been an awesome week, man. We had so much. I know you were super busy. T Stud's super busy. We're traveling the country. We just showcased a whole project done by women from across the country. And it was a really big deal. First time that anybody knows about that all women, from the engineers, architects, plumbers, all build a house together. And to find some of the trades, they actually had to fly them in. It's just proof that we need more. We need more women in this industry because the house is beautiful, and we just need more young people in the industry. And we're working on that too, aren't we, Mark?
Well, I think we are because we're on YouTube, right?
We are on YouTube.
We're on Facebook.
Yeah, we're on Facebook.
We're on LinkedIn Live. And gosh, there's got to be one more, brother.
Twitch. We're on Twitch, Mark, because that's where all the cool kids hang out, like Greg Ugaldi, who's going to be on our show next week. Jen's going to put the highlights on Monday. Greg is going to be on, and we have a special guest. And Jen, you can share that because the special guest is a big player in the industry. It's going to be a lot of fun, but we're going to hold out until the end to tell everybody who that is. Keep them around.
You gotta wait until the end. In the end, I mean, this is a 4-hour show today. So
yeah. You better get some coffee and some dinner ready, because we're gonna be here for an hour, maybe longer, maybe less. We never know. Today's another fun show because we're gonna talk about how buildings can make you sick if you are not doing what you need to do with them, protecting them, maintaining them. Who would have thought that water, a natural resource, could also be our enemy? Who would have thought?
Water in all of its forms is the single largest destroyer of our building stock, right? It's great if it's where it's supposed to be, like in your glass, right? Would be a great spot for water. Oh man, I'm excited about today, Dave. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be fun. We got a presentation. We have some video in that presentation. We got some pictures that'll probably open your eyes and make you go probably crawl in your own attic at some point or another. But before we get into that, Mark, at Dave Cooper Live, we are bringing you the people in the processes that are building it better. Our guests and topics include experts in building systems, to building science, building codes, and the tech used to build it better. We are always seeking out the best and the brightest in construction and discovering all of the ways that innovative buildings come to life. And all of you out there, we are always, Mark, right? Always on the lookout for new and exciting guests to have on the show, just like the one we have today. So if you know somebody who's doing something different, doing something better, doing something passive house, doing something green, using offsite construction in a passive house method, or building science, anything that's better than how we're doing it, we want them on the show.
Speaking of on the show, Dave, I don't know if you saw it. It should be in the LinkedIn chat right now, but we just booked the June 4th show.
Did we? Who's the June 4th show? I haven't seen that yet. Don't keep it from us, Mark.
I tagged you on it. I know you were traveling and setting up the show. NAPHN Network is bringing their Passive House for All hybrid conference June 10th and 11th, and the preview is right here on BS Friday Live.
On BS Friday Live with Mark, Bare Naked Willie, and Dave Cooper. You know what? We're having a lot of these first, Mark, where people are introducing their events on our show, which is awesome. We are neck deep in the industry, bringing building science together with offsite construction and just better ways of building. And it's becoming a place to announce things. And we're real happy with that. And I think it's great. That just means that we're driving the message forward, and we couldn't do it without all the people that tune in for us every week. So thank you so much. That's awesome, Mark.
It's all for the audience. And we did a number of these last year together, Dave, and our feedback was huge, right? And so the fact that we have a couple of these already booked for this year, it's an interesting time we're in. We're not 100% out of the virtual shows. In fact, they're stronger than ever. And so being able to preview those shows is going to always allow for more participation, more inclusivity, and expansive collaboration, because our networks are here to share. And you know people, and I know people, and they
That's
know
right.
people, and we know people. So let us meet your network. And believe me, we're going to share our network with you.
Yeah, we'll bring you in. We'll bring you into our house as well, and that's what it's all about. And believe it or not, we're all pretty nice folk. We
If
have a
you're
good
not
time.
nice, you're not welcome on the show. It's pretty simple.
That's it. That's it. All right, listen, everybody. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Please hit that like button. Let's see those thumbs go up the screen right now. And if you could share this so we reach more people, we really appreciate it. Even if you just hit share and don't write anything, that's fine. We love it. And for all of you that are out there, hey, let us know where you're tuning in from today. You know, we've had Ireland, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, England, France. We're all over the place. So it's fun having that international audience, and we look forward to it. So, Mark, why don't we hop into the show? We have a special guest. I think you should give him his rightly due introduction, because he's going to save us all a lot of future health issues.
I'm ready, Dave. So I had a visual. I have many visuals. I got an entire box full of samples, and samples indicate options, and options are what we need when we're searching for the right solution. Sometimes we don't know what the problem is, and we're not able to discover it without the proper support, the proper team, the proper experienced professionals. When we find that, when we discover what's needed, then we blend that with the solutions that are available in our marketplace, in our region, and to our trades. I've been blessed for years at Chicago by meeting some of the top folks and working with them, and oftentimes the solutions that they come up with were because of years of them continuing to bump up against problems. So my friend Bob is here today. He's a longtime carpenter and contractor in Chicago, and he really honed his skills in roofing and in the drastically kind of missing link in our existing building stock of masonry buildings. And what you'll find throughout the presentation is the problem is scarier than we're aware of. It's more dangerous than we're aware of. And his personality shines so that you're not stunted by what you're facing, but you can approach it. Wick, right? My buddy Bob Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, what's happening,
here,
Bob?
guys? Oh,
hey, it's great. It's great to have you on the show, man. This is going to be excited. We're looking forward to the presentation, Mark. I don't know, man. You're outdoing some of our guests on the introductions. You're doing a great job. What is that? Is that a piece of metal, or it has airflow behind whatever it goes on? Talk us through it. What is it?
This is, look at the break. Look at the break on this piece.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah. Wow.
Look at that. I mean, are you kidding me? That break, that's going to make people's jobs later on, right? Because all buildings need to maintain and service, that much easier, because that was thinking of the next guy that has to come along during the life of our incredible building.
And here's the thing, and Bob, we're going to get into this second, just because, Mark, we have so many young people joining us today. It looks simple, but that is not a simple thing to do, especially in the field. So yeah, it looks just like a little ass. I got to bend a couple pieces of metal, but that's not a simple thing to do, especially in the field. So, all right, Bob, listen, we ask everybody on this show, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time right now. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or we will call your mother. But it also sounds like somebody else is there. We will send Mrs. Wille after you, Mark's mom. She's a big fan, follows us on the show, and she knows when people aren't telling us the full story. But you only have 2 minutes to do it, so have at it.
Okay.
So before you get into your 2 minutes, Bob, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to put Dave's head spinning. There's quite a few brothers and sisters that came along before Bob Kelly, and there's quite a few brothers and sisters that have Bob Kelly as a wonderful father. That is important to note, that his family has allowed him to be who he is today.
Awesome. Well, here, have at it. Don't leave any of the good stuff out, Bob. And if it takes more than 2 minutes, we got the time.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm a little awestruck. You guys, I really appreciate having me on the show. I've been a big fan of yours, and so just to be here is quite an honor.
Thank you.
Well, I'm 55 years old. I was raised in Arlington Heights, just north of a suburb of Chicago. Number 10 child of 11, 9 girls and 1 brother. So I found myself tinkering in the garage quite a bit with my dad's tools. I took everything apart, tried to put it back together, and hide the spare parts. But in the meantime, coming along, I've always had an interest in building. Went to Eastern Illinois University, got a degree in geriatric psychology, and realized that I enjoyed taking things apart and putting them back together way more than running a nursing home. So I was fortunate enough to get a job with a gentleman who took me under his wing, taught me how to build things from scratch. So when you see sheet metal profiles or old style craftsmanship, once you get on that bend of understanding how to approach the craftsman trades, it perpetuates itself. So, as I got married right out of college. My wife and I had 9 children, and there's 6 girls and 3 boys of our own. The oldest is 31, youngest is just turned 11, and they're a beautiful family. So, but a lot of motivation comes from having a large family. And so as a carpenter, I'm also looking for a steady source of work. And I think it's not that it's easy to find a niche, but in this business, when everybody else is doing kitchens and bathrooms and roofing and, masonry individually, really spent quite a few years, I'd say in the past 15 years, looking for this particular niche. We found a constant water issue present in all masonry buildings in Chicago. Now, we are in climate zone 5. And climate zone 5, with Chicago, we basically in, 100-degree swings of degrees, as well as being in a marine environment. So it's really harsh on our buildings. So when I started getting into sheet metal, about halfway through my career, a buddy of mine was saying that there's always water behind roof membranes. I had a hard time believing that. But then as we got into these projects, it was over and over and over again. So the quest for finding a niche, we started having to repair these things. Over time, well, the first job we did, we found that if we created an air gap behind the roof membranes and underneath the coping, there's got to be some place for this water to go. So the quick and dirty on the history is the house dried out, which led us to doing more of the same work. And so now I'd like to start my presentation, because there's a evolution that we got our teeth sunk into this topic, and then we just didn't let go. So here we go.
I love it.
So we're talking about how to fix dangerous wet buildings. Now I'm going to start out by saying, the inventory that we work with is very young. Buildings from 5 years to 30 years are our target audience. Older buildings is another conversation that we'll have outside of this, but I'll get right into it now. How to fix wet, dangerous buildings. In Chicago, there's thousands of buildings less than 30 years old. They say that during the building boom of which ended in 2008, there were over 100,000 buildings built with this product called split face block. It's the textured cinder block you'd see at a Walmart or a Target, typically. So you look at these buildings, some of the first signs of water flowing through the structure is something called efflorescence, and that's a powdery substance that's left oftentimes in the spring after the building is drying out from the cold weather that we experience in Chicago. So, but this is often the first sign of trouble. But what does it mean to contemporary masonry structure? Here's some following photographs of clients that we've fixed their buildings, but this is where they started. You can see in this particular picture, you follow the trail of the water from the lentils and limestone above all those windows. It was actually capturing the water, and the water is flowing downward, and there's no flashing or end dams in that structure, and it's just feeding water into those columns. There's another parapet wall that was saturated and I was trying to dry out. Here's another common brick building where the efflorescence there is typical of when buildings are repointed with the wrong mortar, too hard a mortar. Here's another client. Yeah, that was a tough one. This always surprises me when I see this one. Here's yet another taller building that's got efflorescence at the floor level. As we zoom in, you can see how the moisture is going. See that band of white just at the floor level? That's actually a product called Renaissance stone. Now, Renaissance stone is like calling tissue paper Kleenex. It's a precast material, but it's extremely porous. It was engineered to be porous, but nobody learned to flash behind it properly. But that's why this is present here. Another client where they just had a perpetual, water issue, but that water issue was actually from water vapor rising through the structure and getting trapped under the through-wall flashing at the roof. Put your head around that one. Another client who has just water flowing through. In this particular case, they happen to have closed cell foam on the interior of this. We're not here to have opinions about materials. We're just talking about how the combination of materials has effects on these structures. Here's a hospital where I was driving past. Every parapet wall is soaking wet. Yet another split face block, 3-unit building.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
If we could, we're getting some comments at the PowerPoint. There's a lag in what people are seeing.
Okay.
So if just before you switch through slides, give it a second so people can catch up. I think it's just the internet, and I'm getting some feedback as well. So if you could turn down your mic a little bit too.
All right. Thank you.
Your sound.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Here's a stairwell wall that we uncovered, only to show more wet CMU. Yet, the following pictures are still going to be just all examples of how copings and masonry is taking on moisture.
Wow.
Now, when you see the difference in color, oftentimes that's the difference between wet and dry. Now, here's efflorescence on an entire side of a building. It was getting trapped by going through the limestone. Limestone is not waterproof, and there's no water management. And this client had a lot of water soaking all their trusses and drywall inside.
Hey, Bob, for the people not familiar with efflorescence, could you walk them through what moisture does and the mineral movement that it causes throughout a standard brick and block?
Yes.
Yeah. Mark, let me add to that, Bob. If anybody's had a basement in the Northeast, an older house, like just about every house I had efflorescence in the basement on the walls. I mean, so that's the same thing, is it not?
It is exactly
just
the same thing.
Put a common thing that most people might have seen in their lives. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay, so I'm glad you brought up the older foundation versus the newer material. Now, to Mark's point, the efflorescence is because water is flowing through the structure, and as it dries, it's bringing materials out on the surface. Oftentimes through the more porous of the two materials that are on the wall. So what's interesting here is that there's no efflorescence on the mortar joints. There's only efflorescence on the block. That's an important point. Now, because there's this thing called Portland cement that everybody takes for granted as being basic mortar. If you do a little history, Thomas Edison was the guy who enabled Portland cement to become mass produced back in the 30s, and so it became an epoxy additive to pure lime mortars for them to set up quicker. So that's one of the reasons why these harder substrates, they don't breathe. They take out moisture, but they don't breathe out. Whereas the older lime mortars were the breathing mechanism, and that's why you wouldn't see efflorescence on brick very often, except if it was underground. I'll come back to the next. Do you guys have any other questions?
No, I'm just looking to I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, how we fix some of these things, because this is prevalent in just about every house I've ever lived in that was older. You know, and the fact that it doesn't go through mortar and can get through block and brick. I mean, that's kind of a scary thing, because that's so common across this country. I mean, even in the South, that's all they use is block and concrete and brick. So let's hop into it. I'll shut up and let you go, Bob.
No, I appreciate the discourse. Okay.
All of that is important, Dave, because truly the beginning part of this presentation is to be redundant with the mass amount of slides that you're used to seeing as you drive and walk and visit these communities, and then be aware that it's not supposed to be like that. Right. So these are signs that are telling us, yeah, these have to be addressed. And we should be scared, and we should realize how monumental this problem is.
For sure.
Yeah, Mark, the problem is it's an industry-wide issue. It's a cultural issue. And to that point, before I go on to any more slides, it's interesting is that, you know, traditions are passed down like from father to son, and then through the apprenticeship program. And when we teach the same things over and over again and nobody's been questioning it, then you get into, you know, a whole world of hurt. Now we have basically every masonry structure that's ever been constructed is porous. And now the analysis is, how do we get these things to dry out? And why didn't they show problems before? And I'll continue on with this. So we have a little video to show you here. One of my early projects, I looked down through a capstone, and I saw some water under, you know, in the wall. So I was able to measure down and identify where this was coming from. So, pardon me a second, and I'll start this right now. But I've seen this more than once. It's not just here.
Oh my gosh. Wow, all that was trapped in there.
It was all trapped in there, right. So the tradition of not using flashings is present in old structures, okay? So then when you have a culture of people who are trained in old structures come over and work with harder, more contemporary materials, this is what happens. All right.
So like the gravity of this, right, Dave? Like he knows there's something back there, but until that hole's there, this water never had a place to go, right? And it is pouring out like drinking fountains can't keep up with a sucker.
Exactly.
I wish I had that kind of pressure at some of the motorhome parks I've been staying in.
But
just drive by a masonry building and start drilling holes, Dave, if you can.
Yeah. No problem. That's, right, that's a 2-volt hammer drill.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that video. I want everyone to be scared. That's not a mock. That's not created. There wasn't a random hose in the wall, right? That is water stuck in our wall. Stuck.
Yeah.
Bob, how many times have you done that same thing where you would drill a hole to let the water out? Like how many? So every time I look at a wet wall, I mean, I almost need to keep a drill in my car just so I can help the people out and just go up and drill a hole through the mortar to let the water run out. That's what I'm feeling.
You know, it's interesting, and people have asked me that question, but it's so random. So, you know, the hard mortars, okay, Portland cement is a hard mortar. Type O, N, S, M, you name it. The Portlands they make things set up hard, okay, whereas the softer mortars don't. But so when I've seen other leaks like this, it's when we had to go and cover a parapet because it was raining and water would just cascade into somebody's home. And then when we fastened the tarps to the block, that's when we saw water weeping out.
Got it.
And that's probably happened a dozen times.
Interesting. And tell me, what does the tarp do?
Well,
Can you explain that so people listening can understand?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So when we're in like an emergency repair of we cover the parapet wall so that the water stops flowing through the limestone and down into the walls.
Got it. And that allows you to dry it out and repair it.
That allows us to at least give them some temporary relief until we get a chance to get into a roofing project. And that's something I'm going to share with you in a little bit.
All right, let me go back. I'll put the slide back up.
Okay. So, so of course, all the water that we see in these structures is leading towards structural deterioration. So early indicators we find are efflorescence and then wet walls. Now, what's interesting about looking at a building, when you see cinder block and you see each layer seems to be wet a few inches, that's an indication that there's water at every mortar joint. We get into other condominiums where the smells are pretty rough. It's very musty. Ponding water on rooftops can indicate that there's some rotten plywood or sagging. If trusses are starting to fail. Of course, the soft plywood on the roof sheathing. The first thing I do when I get to a project is I walk the perimeter carefully. One time I was a little careless and it had a very low parapet and I didn't realize I was almost walking into a hole. There was no plywood at all. I almost fell off the building. So if anybody's doing these inspections, just be careful. Here's a ponding on a roof, and that would say that's not necessarily poorly pitched, but that's where the structure is sagging.
Mm-hmm.
This is a telltale sign right here. Holy crap, Ole. I told you, people, we were going to be scared. This is real.
Yeah.
It is real, but I have a question. You're saying it's not poorly pitched. The structure is sagging. And what you're saying there is that the footers of the structure have dropped a little bit on one side and the whole building kind of leaned like the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
I wish worse than that, actually.
Let's understand that because I think everybody's seen standing water on roofs.
Okay, well, what we're talking about is how the roof system is actually decaying in place and crushing under its own weight. So
that's what we're looking at here.
That's what we're looking at right here, right? The ends of the trusses are rotting from the interior of the parapet wall, and at some point you will find that these trusses will shear off in place.
That word "shear off in place" ought to scare people. Another telltale sign. So Dave, this is the review of the outside, and digging into it. Another telltale sign. I think there's a photograph coming up. Is when you're walking the interior and looking around the exterior wall, but all of a sudden there's a huge gap between your flooring and your baseboard. Sometimes it just means you had a crappy carpenter, but sometimes it means that your floor is dropping.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, your floor. I don't have that picture here. I'm sorry, Mark, but
that's okay. These are better.
Yeah, when I saw that particular situation that you've mentioned, we were talking with the contractor, the homeowners, and my engineer, and I said we got to go. So I took the meeting outside. So the next few pictures are going to be of typical top hanging and bottom bearing trusses. These are top hanging. See the Portland cement. See the code. This is what's crazy about this work. Code mandates grouting of trusses in place. So practice. I've never seen a truss that was covered on the ends, and all it would take is a Ziploc baggie to keep the water from going up through the end grain of the wood. And the Portland cement tends to corrode all the galvanized plates. So that's also something to take note of. But
a Ziploc baggie or, wrapping with an ice and water shield, right?
Ice and water shield.
Creating the barrier.
Zip tape, whatever, can create a barrier, right? So this wasn't as bad, of course, but where the arrow is right there, that's where when we were cleaning things out, we were, starting to clear out the grout on the sides of the trusses, which is something we do on every job.
So let me ask you this, Bob. That doesn't look like an old structure to me. I mean, that's definitely not built back in the early 1900s with the truss, floor system there. And maybe you're going to get into this, so maybe I shouldn't ask. But when you have a new structure like this, is the general contractor at fault for this? Like, how does this work? Is the architect at fault for this? Like, how there's liability. These are not simple, inexpensive fixes, right?
That's a great question, and we're gonna pick up on that in a little bit as well.
All right,
but the almost nobody's responsible.
All right, I'll let you get into it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, please.
It's making me nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh.
So, Dave, you should be nervous because you pointed out, hey, this is an EWP, right? This is a new truss. I don't know. What is this building? 12 years old, Bob? I'm guessing.
About 13.
Okay, so pretty close. 13 years old, and you could see the black and rot in that SPF leg. You can see it. It's that is black.
Yeah, and this is after it dried out.
Wow.
Let's see here. Okay. My pocket knife always tells the tale. There's another. This is a parapet on an older building that was rebuilt about 20 years ago. But because they wrapped the roof over the top, they trapped all the moisture that was rising up through the common brick.
Oh,
another.
So when you say the rising up to the common brick, I don't think people understand that. Mark, you did a demonstration once where you stuck the wood in the water and you could see how the water wicked up the wood. Are you telling me that water wicks up brick the same way it wicks up wood?
Oh, it's crazy. So yes. The wood is a carrier because of the capillary. You're totally right, Dave. But the exploring that you're going to see here is that moisture is just funneling its way up, right? Like literally, if it was ants at a picnic, it'd be a darn parade.
Oh yeah. What's interesting is when water goes into masonry, the common thought is that water flows down and out. That's when a building becomes fully saturated. But what's really happening initially, when water hits the side of any sort of masonry structure, it spreads three-dimensionally, so it defies gravity. The first building that I saw this with was there was a mold problem in a nursery. They tore out the drywall. Then, as an experiment, I just said, let's see what happens when we get water on this wall. Well, the water spot on the outside may have been a 1.5 feet in diameter, whereas the water spot on the inside was probably about 3 feet higher and wider, as well as deeper. And so it was that particular experience where I went around to all of the condos in that same building, and I drilled holes through the quarter round in and tagged into the top quarter of the trusses. At that point, my moisture readings were somewhere between 45 and 70%. And it kind of blew my mind. How could a dry building with a coating on it be reading, underwater basically?
Well, that's it. I mean, listen, I burn wood, in the winter sometimes, and you get over 15%. It's heck to pay to even start the wood. I mean, so those numbers are astronomical. You're right. That's like being in a swimming pool. Yeah.
So here's another project. Of course, just showing more rotten plywood. When you start getting into this work, it's one thing that's important to note. I had to unlearn everything that I've learned about how things are supposed to go together. I had to realize that there wasn't just a bad building on the block, but when you look at systems are all the same. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a $20 million house with brick and block or a $300,000 building with block. They all have the same components. So there's another example of rotten trusses. The dangers here, of course, the talk on the street right now is, when is the next platform collapse or pancaking going to happen? There's been a couple of pancaking situations that I heard about. The first one was a gentleman went out for drinks one night. He came back in his rooftop deck on a 14-year-old building, was sitting on his pillow. Another couple of collapses I've heard about in the past year were mostly bowstring truss structures where the common brick had given away. In fact, the other day, Mark, you know where this location is? It's on Dayton and Wisconsin, right in downtown Lincoln Park in Chicago.
I have my footprint all over there. I don't tell me the address because I hope it wasn't a building I did.
No, it wouldn't be. But it was a 1991 building. They just demoed it. So
my heart just dropped. Thankfully, that wasn't my building, Dave. So we're okay.
Disclaimer: Mark and I have no relationship when it comes to any structures in Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm in New England. He's in Chicago. So let's just put that disclaimer in there now. Go ahead, Mark.
You're all good.
The shocking part is it's a 1991 structure that now is completely demolished.
Yeah.
Because of health and safety. And I don't know if this is a common thing in other cities, Dave, but there's been massive problems over the years in Chicago with porch failures. So the ledger's not put on right or not maintained right, depending. And there's finger pointing to the maintenance of the building, to the inspection of the porches, yada yada. And at the end of the day, that's on the outside where that ledger is allowed to breathe during many of the months. The problem is when you look at trusses and joists on the inside, that moisture is not letting them breathe. So it's actually scarier for the inside of the building than a deck. I want to pause for a second, Bob, and Dave, if you can pull us into the audience and just do some hellos.
Yeah, for sure. Command tab, Bob, join us full screen here. We're going to say hello to a few people. I'm so excited and into this conversation. Everybody else must be just staring at their computer screens as well. Let's say hi to a few people here. So I know Greg's in the hey, Greg, you must have sent Mark some samples. He said thank you to you and T-Stud. I love it. By the way, everybody, Greg's going to be on the show. I know I was going to save it. Let me put it in the ticker. But we have the president and CEO of the Home Builders Institute, Ed Brady, on our show Monday. So we have the top dog from, I don't know if that's the correct way to say, top person, individual from HBI on our show with Greg Ugaldi this Monday. So everybody, please tune in. Greg, I saw Greg putting in the comments. He beat me to it. Greg, I was making everybody hold out to the end of the show. You beat me to it, man.
Greg. I look forward to Monday, and it's going to be a great conversation.
It's going to be a very great conversation. All right, Buzz Holitzer's in the house from the Great Lakes state of Go Blue. What is happening? And we also have Shannon Pendleton. Hey, Bob, thanks for leading the way for us. PH is in passive house. Yeah, we got a spelling problem on this show, Bob. I can't explain it, but nobody knows how to use an F. I love it. Diane Knight says, go, Bob. Matthew Cooper says, we need more tin knockers. I love it. Matthew, you tuned in yesterday. That was a great show. So thank you. I saw we had a comment and we really appreciate your support. All right, let's see.
I always say that Matthew Cooper is Brian and Dave's long lost cousin.
That's right. That's right. Might be. We just don't know. We got to check our genealogy. Is that what it is? All right, Joe Konopaki. Got it right, Joe. Good to see everyone at another BS Friday. Bob has been the point man on this masonry building moisture issue. Go, Bob, go. Love it. Love it. Peter Molinar says this topic is a bit fuzzy. No pun intended. If you're just joining us, you're going to need to go back and watch why he said that. And that's kind of funny. Very, very creative. I wish I had such a creative mind, man. I love
you know,
oh,
Dave,
wait a minute. He messed up his spelling.
Fuzzy.
Fuzzy. Shannon says she needs a tear emoji, Bob, for your water video. Wasn't that something? Brett Serini says, and I hope I got that right. Brett Siriani, I hope I got that right, says, wow. And that really is. And then Brett also says, why aren't weeping holes specified in the design in order to allow water and moisture to escape? That's a good question. Or should they be in the design? Or should we keep water and moisture out of that brick and block? We haven't gotten that far in the presentation. What's your thoughts on that, Bob?
Yeah, weeps they're important at the platform flashings. We employ the use of weeps mostly at doors and windows. I've got a different idea about how platforms should be flashed. The flashing traps the moisture and the uprise, and we need to seal buildings but cover the wood. So, but yeah, weeps have been they work for sure.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you very much.
I think sometimes too, when buildings are repointed, sometimes the crew that's doing the grinding and the clearing and the people that follow up and repoint it, sometimes with all the dust and speed and slurry and really naiveness that goes on, those weeps are then covered up. And if and most likely that mortar mix is not proper for that brick, you're creating loads more problems. You were actually better off not repointing. And I hate to say that because our masonry professionals are in those trenches, but it just goes to show you that you have to use the right material for that layer so that the brick's life is not threatened.
Right. Good point, Mark.
Let's not threaten life on this show, Mark. All right. Happy Friday, Scott. You got to work on your spelling, man. I never miss a chance to tune into Bob Kelly and get frightened to own a historic masonry house. Yeah, think about it. That changes my thought, and those houses are beautiful. Beautiful. And Diane Knight says that most of the buildings that Wickwright works on are less than 20 years old. Is that a true fact?
That's a true fact.
Man, my Lord. Well, maybe an old house isn't so bad then. Who knows?
It's better. Trust me.
Boy, how our opinions change real quick on this show, huh? I love it. Yeah, Peter has a funny comment. Water can defy gravity, and it really, truly does. Let me go down here a little further. All right, Scott Farman says, Diane Knight, she's talking back tonight, most 20 years old, typically during the early 2000 booms, the split face block, but the same concept applies to historic masonry buildings, especially if they've been retrofitted at some point. There's some answers for you there. Moving down the line, Oh, Brown and Berry is with us. She says, same in the San Francisco Bay. Porch collapses, kill people here every few years. And Rob Hoskins says, and we're going to get back to the presentation next, interested to see how the solutions work from the second wettest region in the U.S., Western PA. Western PA, that's my hometown, Pittsburgh, man. It does. I think it rains more in Western PA than it does in Seattle.
So this is interesting. If that's the second wettest, what's the wettest? Is it the Northwest Coast?
I guess it's Seattle, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I knew it rained a lot in Pennsylvania, so that Western PA is Pittsburgh, so in Lake Erie. So I'm just wondering. Hey, Bob, give us some stats. Snope us on that, man. All right, let's get back into it, Bob. I'm going to go back to the presentation here, and let's keep the audience entertained. This is really interesting. Like one of the most interesting presentations because we can all relate to how this transformed into sick buildings. That's where this is headed. People get sick from this stuff. Keep going.
Okay, we'll keep it going. Okay, so the last slide I had up, of course, dangers to residents, physical peril. residents and their personal property, just structural failure. The indoor air quality. As a father, it concerns me quite a bit when I walk in and I smell a musty structure. There's a lot of moisture that's sitting in the walls. It's radiating moisture into the structure, and of course, asthma, allergies, respiratory illness. We're going to see segments of our population, in these areas. These illnesses are going to rise. We've already done a map, laying out high levels of this respiratory illness issue with where all the repairs have been done, and it's a pretty strong correlation just on our own time frame here. So, of course, now we have dangers to contractors. Bottom line is, when you walk onto some of these buildings, you don't know what you're walking into, and you're just oftentimes crossing your fingers. So, rotting plywood, trusses, TGIs. For those who don't know what TGIs are, it's a particle board. It looks like an I-joist. It's a great product when you're using it in a wood frame, but many contractors use these sitting in the masonry, and the particle board just has no tolerance for water.
It's terrible. I mean, for people that aren't used to being in the trades and working on existing buildings, we do laugh about this stuff because you're overwhelmed by the amount of catastrophes that you discover, and it's certainly that we don't feel for the folks that have been enduring this and not sure why. That's why we're there. We love solving these problems. But that line you said, Bob, it just hit it with me that these materials are not supposed to be around this much water, and they're not. They're on the interior of your wall, and you think, hey, well, I got this nice, humongous 20-year-old brick building. Of course, there's not water in there, and these pictures are showing us the complete contrary. And the amount of headaches and fatigue and sickness from this photo right here is in insurance and health. I don't even know what to say. It scares the crap out of me.
This is like a carbon disaster on steroids, Mark, right? But it's not carbon. This is a building disaster.
This is a health disaster, a dangerous disaster. Oh, geez, Bob. I told you to scare me, but now I'm not going to be able to sleep.
Yeah, I'm not going in any masonry buildings built in the last 20 years. I'm going to have to, before you walk in, you're going to have to prove to me when this was built.
Well, the nose knows, Dave, right? The nose knows. You actually know it when you walk in the building first. You just don't know where and how drastic it is, right, Bob?
Right, exactly. I, as a finish carpenter who loves millwork, I used to walk through an old Victorian and just run my hand over the profiles and, almost like memorize the crown molding or the casing or the beautiful staircase. Now I walk into a building and I sniff.
Yeah.
So we have, more issues that we need to consider is that when these buildings are filling up with moisture, you do see cracked block. You see rusting lintels and steel support beams. Now, this particular building right here is 26 years old. I saw this last week, and that's an I-beam that's supporting 3 stories. That I-beam is about as curved as a wet noodle. In fact, I reached in and grabbed a chunk of the steel out and suggested to the condo association that it's time to open this thing up and see how to fix it. So this is interesting. Financial danger. There's a handful of things that it's tough to negotiate when you see these issues. Insurance does not cover it. They call it faulty workmanship, but nobody knows that they have this mold farm within their roof system or under their floors. It's the contractor. When you can't necessarily go into a job like this unless you're working on it on a time and material basis, because you often just start to unfold and you don't know where the job's going to stop. In fact, to that point, we just we're on the tail end of a pool house repair where somebody put a lap pool in basically inside of a living room, and the entire roof system was so dilapidated. We pulled back all the materials and we just didn't know when to stop. So now it's rebuilt. Liability to clients, contractors, you really have to learn how to be able to separate yourself from the project with your contracts. Now, advising residents to vacate or not, that's a hard call to make. The job where I saw the floor sinking, I told them to leave and get the place shored up as quickly as possible. In that particular house, they saw drywall coming loose from the ceiling. Well, it wasn't the drywall coming loose from the ceiling. It was the trusses shearing from the inside of the parapet walls.
What?
Yeah. It was bad. The roof system was about to drop, and then they put up a shoring wall.
Right.
And then the contractor put up a shoring wall on top of a floor that was sinking. So there is that. We'll go on.
The impact of that, like, we smirk, right? All of us smirk because we're stunned. And the highlight of that story is the homeowner was not there when the collapse happened, right? So we're not telling you a story of a tragic ambulance ride.
Right.
It's still scary, Bob. And when you're just saying that, hey, when your drywall starts dropping, something behind that is a bigger monster. And when it happens to be your truss, roof, and assembly at these multi-unit stories, it's going to be a domino effect, and the cost is rising by the minute.
It rises by the minute. Yeah, that hits home. Now, the title on this next slide should be, dangerous musical chairs, basically. All these young families that I meet when I do like a masonry inspection, everybody says we'll just be there for 5 years. If I've heard that once, I've heard it 100 times. So in Chicago during the building boom, there were over 100,000 buildings built with this split face block. Now, contemporary structures also have the same issues. Just because they don't have the porous block doesn't mean they don't have water issues. This is all single family, multifamily, mixed use. They all have the same materials. It doesn't matter what their purpose is. They're all price levels. In fact, I was at a house last week where when the guy opened the door of a 7-year-old, $3 million home, I felt like I got hit in the face with a wet beach towel. It was so wet. The housing stock becomes unsaleable for sure. But unsaleable is one thing, but I was on another inspection the other day, and they said, we want to live in this area, but there's nothing else to choose from. It's all the same. So a lot of people are cycling through housing stock that everybody is just hoping that it's not going to be their turn. What buildings in prestigious neighborhoods are definitely in the process of being demoed. Now, of course, now we're getting into the 30-year range. And of course, I was trained on fixing buildings that were 120 years old and old Victorians. So to say a 30-year-old building breaks my heart. And wet buildings are definitely less desirable neighborhoods will eventually just be condemned, and because they can't afford to repair them. That's a tough one. Now, in this next section, I think it's important to understand that building science, for these problems, building science is not to blame. The supply chain. I used to go to a lumberyard up on the North Shore of Chicago as a young carpenter contractor. I just expected they would sell me everything that I needed to build a house. But then we have the issue of talent. And in this case, with masonry structures, the talent often comes from Europe, where they're classically trained in historic mortars and techniques. So building science isn't to blame, but they're making buildings tighter. Supply chain only, sells materials to the talent, and the talent is familiar with, good practice where they were trained. So now this is why we have this three-way train wreck in our building environment. So split, the things that we look for. So the next few slides are really just going to be identifying materials that are used. And then we can get into, how the combinations of these have issues. So we see.
Hey, Bob, why don't we take a second, get to some comments, and then come back to this section here? Does that sound good to you, Mark?
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right, we're going to go back to full screen, Bob, so I do not have your presentation up at the moment. Let me go in here. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. All right, we have a lot of chat going on, which is good. Bronwyn Berry, how do we bake accountability into the construction of buildings, new and retrofit? This starts at design, continues into approval, and the review at the city level, and then at implementation with the contractor and inspectors. How do we have accountability into this chain of responsibility?
Bronwyn, I appreciate it, and Bronwyn's one of our presenters coming up on June 4th. So thank you for today. One of the thoughts that I always have with that Bronwyn is first establishing the complete team. What I could consider the complete team is the energy modeler, certifier, tester, building inspector team. Right. First, we're evaluating what the situation is currently and how their involvement will play out throughout the project. Then we have, of course, any of the architectural, structural, and design folks involved that are needed for the drawing and the permitting stage. And then, of course, you have an array of different contractors and tradespeople, depending on the complexity and assemblies involved. And then we have our manufacturers and suppliers. So when this team is brought together, there's an ebb and flow of each person's responsibility, but it's not that people fall into place as it goes. We all need a collective collaboration in the front and a charrette, they call it often in the industry. Whatever your magic term is, it's to have all those players involved and to have a point person for the client and for all those people, groups, entities to have a point person to the client so that the dissemination and sequencing is expected, not surprised. So we each have a role, and it could be many people with many complex responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. So there's a surprising concept. Have everybody in place up front that knows their job, knows their roles, who's communicating with the customer, who's communicating with the building department. Oh, and by the way, who's in charge of air barriers and house sealing and house wraps? Who's inspecting the people that are installing that so there are none of these issues and occupants stay safe and the consumer or the developer has a building that'll be there for a lifetime.
You're sequencing and you're verifying at those various steps. Yeah. It's knowing that if I'm step 4 and I see step 3 is not complete, then I throw my hand out and say, hey, this is here. Who addresses it, right? You have to say that this will come up. That's a beautiful wall that's there. And guess what? There's 1,000 penetrations happening. So who's responsible in that sequence? Who's as we call it, the air boss, right? And how do we test for it? And how do we build in that process? Well, it's called communication because there will be things that come up. And I'm glad that you bring light of that, Bronwyn. Dave, next question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. And by the way, I'm an air barrier specialist myself, or what have you. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Let me just be very clear about that. I went through the training and I succeeded and I passed with our friends at SIGA. So, all right. Hey, Mark, isn't somebody coming back on the? Who's on next Friday, Mark?
Dave, if you hold your hands up and you point
That way? I'm going to fall off my chair.
Hey, Bob, can we give you a high five?
Oh, yeah, we got to do the high fives. Which way is it? Everybody know? No, you got to go left or right, Bob.
Oh, sorry.
This way. There's
There
fine.
you
Now you got
go.
to do the other side for Mark. You got
All
to.
right, just do both sides.
Oh.
We all do both sides.
That's great.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. All right. Enough of the shenanigans.
It's enough shenanigans. We covered an amount of problems, historic amount of dangerous photos, and Bob, the wink that Dave's given me is, we want to arrange the schedule, and we want you back next week to do a deeper dive. Are you up for the challenge, brother?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we were talking about this. I mean, this is it's keeping everybody's attention. So if you want to get the solutions and how these problems are fixed, you're going to have to tune in next Friday with Bob Kelly. Bob, we've already been at this an hour and 5 minutes, and Mark and I were chatting in the background. We said, there's no way we're going to get through all the solutions and the patents and things that you have come up with. And I think that the topic hits home for every builder developer in the country, in the world. There's enough here that I think that a lot of people will want to have the solutions as well as just pointing out what the issues are.
There's a bigger list than that, Dave. It's the property management companies.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the maintenance professionals that are seeing it, and they don't know where to report it to. Right. It's the building inspectors that come on for the buys and sells. I mean, we're talking single family, we're talking double unit, triple unit.
That's right.
6-unit, multi-unit. It's vast. And then it's the insurance carriers that can mine the data and say, okay, these 14 houses off of Union Street that were built by X company had the same supply. We need to let these people know that an inspection and a review of that building can happen so that a life is not in jeopardy.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree.
Absolutely.
So I love it. So Shannon Pendleton had a question, but Shannon, I'm thinking we're going to make you wait till next week for the answer, but let's look at it real quick. Bob, how would Rick Wright advise folks who want to add interior insulation and an interior rain screen to historic buildings with deep eaves, a room at a time?
That's a 12-minute answer. Not going to happen, Shannon.
12-minute answer. So Shannon, bring that question back. We're going to have that question next week. And Diane Knight's been working hard in the background there, Bob Kelly, talking to people and answering questions and all that. So
she's a great partner. I've got a great appreciation for Diane.
Diane, we have a challenge for you since you're a marketing whiz. I'll be putting the link up shortly after this. I'll recreate the link. I'll share it with Jennifer, Dave, Bob, and you, Diane. And let's let the audience know that we're coming back for part 2 of Dangerous Buildings with Bob Kelly of Wicks.
That's right. All right, everybody. Hey, Mark, I may have sound effects next week. I got some new stuff going.
Can we do a scary building sound effect? Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, we're gonna take it up a notch. We're gonna take it up a notch. Diane Knight. All right, say hi to Andrew Seeley real quick, Mark, before I take him off the screen.
Andrew, my brother Seeley from Chicagoland himself. Particle board has no tolerance for water. In fact, particle board doesn't belong in our buildings unless you're making crafts.
That's right. And Andrew, we will be in Austin, Texas on the 19th, only a week and a half away. We're flying in for some meetings and flying back to Boise, Idaho. So hopefully while we are in it, let's connect, my friend. Always enjoy getting together with Andrew. So
Bring
put
your
it on your
helmet,
calendar. We'll be
Dave.
there.
Dave,
What's
bring
that?
your helmet and ride the motorcycle out there at Andrews Complex. Oh man, you gotta get down in between San Antonio and Austin. There's a beautiful spot called G Pod Americas.
Pod in the house. And Mark, I got to put a funny story. So we booked these flights to go, and we told all the kids we're leaving the motor. We're going to Austin, Texas, because Bob, we're traveling the country right now doing our live road show. And he just the next day, my son woke up. He's 4. He goes, "How are you going to get the motorhome on the plane?" Oh, it was so cute. I was like, he's thinking.
I saw Ant-Man the movie, and apparently you just press a button and the motorhome gets small, and you're covered. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. It is.
You'll need a big
thing.
pocket to put that motorhome in, but I'll let you figure that out, Dave.
I love it. Go ahead, read this one from Scott Farman there, Mark.
Okay, Mr. Scott Farman says, building owners, consumers need better representation on the Energy Code Advisory Councils. Get the code changed to better protect them. Don't let the NHP lobbying building science out of the code because it costs more. So what you're saying, Scott, is it's inclusive for all of us. And I agree. It's from the consumer to the supplier to the wonderful contractors in our industry. It's an inclusive responsibility that we all need to step forward on.
Yeah, 100%. And Diane has some serious confidence, Bob. Diane Knight says, "I'm awesome." I love it. It is wonderful having people on the team that have your back and take care of each other. That's what it's all about. I'm reading her comments as she goes, and you're very lucky from what I'm seeing to have somebody like Diane as a partner with you.
Of course.
For sure. I love it. All right. Greg Ugaldi says, outstanding show with Mark and Dave. Love it. Be sure to tune in Monday with Greg Ugaldi, the immediate past chairman at NAHB, and myself. And we're going to have Ed Brady on, CEO and president of Home Builders Institute. We are going to give you updates of what's happening in the industry, what we're doing with workforce development, and so much more. There is a lot going on. Greg is coming back from his national board meetings, and he's going to bring a lot of information with him, as he always does. And he's bringing new guests all the way from the very top of the HBI, which is a big deal. Bob, do you know Greg Ugaldi, Bob?
No, we've never met.
Well, you know him now. Greg is the head of the National Association of Home Builders, immediate past president, or this is his second tour around the globe, as I say. So, Greg, always a pleasure when you tune in. All right. So Mark Wickwright coming back next Friday. We have verbal confirmation. Bob, this is also recorded. Our contracts are strong. There's no showing up. You're going to be here. So that's just the way it goes. Tell him, Mark, verbal contracts are the best.
So you got any parting words for us? Take us out, Bob. I'm glad you're here today, brother. Dave, I can't wait for coffee tomorrow. And you get the ability to wrap up the show as the last words before you're back next week.
That's right. Bring it up.
You guys are the best. I appreciate it. And I like to surround myself with smarter people than I. So I'm glad I'm here.
Well, we're going to have to invite some other people on the show then, Mark. That's not going to work.
It's beautiful.
Sorry to let you down, Bob. Hey, listen, Bob, thanks so much. And everybody else out there, thanks for all the comments, and everybody in the banners and comments that are going back and forth with all their shenanigans and what have you. We love the real conversation. This is why people tune in to BS Friday. No matter what you think or how you feel, what's going on out there, there are a lot of great people in every organization that want to drive this industry forward. So this is awesome. Building Science is a great show. Mark Bare Naked Willie always outdoes himself when it comes to these shows and what he's doing out there for the environment and for our buildings. I'm Dave Cooper. I will see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., live, Coffee with Dave. We will be talking about what happened this past week, what's coming up next week. We have some big shows. We will be at AutoVault on Tuesday, special show, 1 o'clock, 400,000 square feet of robotic house building manufacturing that is happening with some wonderful people. Rick Murdoch, CEO and founder. And we're also going to be interviewing other people on the floor. So be sure to put that on your calendar. You do not want to miss it. We will be the first ones, Mark, first ones to show inside live.
It's incredible. The facility is incredible. The processing is incredible. And I beg you, Dave, get footage of the parking lot up front, the deployment center that they have. It is such a well-run, well-prepared company.
Yep.
And that frontage of their facility is monumental. It shows that they're here for the future of our industry.
They are. They're here. They're here to stay, and their culture is amazing. And thank you to NAHB student chapter, because Bob, I don't know if you know this, our shows are being live streamed into university classrooms across the country. We got universities and professors that are using this information to help teach and educate the next generation. So we appreciate NAHB and all their support with that. They are looking to grow and change with us. So with that said, Mark, Bob, we'll see you next Friday, man. You'll be surprised. The week's going to fly by, and you're going to be right there center stage with Mark, Bare Naked, Willie, and I. Everybody else, have a wonderful weekend. Bob, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you after the outro. Thumbs up, everybody. Thumbs up. Or should we high five again? That's the easy way to do it to get it right. We'll see you next time, everybody. Bye now.